Hey everyone, my name is Eric Jones, better known as the Turf Teacher, and welcome to the course entitled Social Security Taxes. Now, probably not one of the most glamorous courses to actually take to get your continuing education, but nonetheless, still very important. And this is something that, comes out of your employees' checks. It's also something that comes out of your paycheck as the business owner when you do write yourself a check, or how it's all taken out of the business. And so I will recommend that you speak with your CPA or a tax attorney before doing anything different in your business. This course is for informational purposes only, and I consult with my attorney on a regular basis all of the time. Always consult with him. He's very much a good friend of the family. I admire him as I would my grandfather, because he is old enough to be my grandfather. He's in his 80s, but he recently kind of stepped away from the accounting profession and is no longer licensed to actually do it, but went to work for another CPA. I guess he just got tired of working full time and getting his continuing education to keep his license. He's like, hey, I'm old enough to do some traveling, and he's got him a new young woman that's keeping him hot on the roads, and so they like to go and do things. And so he went to work part time with another CPA firm, who has now taken over our taxes. But my former CPA still does our bookkeeping for us, and I couldn't do it without him. Him and our attorney is somebody that's on speed dial for our landscape business. So, as most of you know, I do the turf teacher stuff, but we also run a full service landscape contracting company, Elite Landscape Contractors, Inc. So let's dive in to Social Security taxes and what they're all about. So our objectives for this course, we're going to identify, for Social Security purposes, those persons or people covered under the law and those services that make up employment plan construction activities. So this fits right in with the green industry, right? We're kind of considered in that construction realm, even though we are green industry. But landscape contractors, we build stuff, so we are landscape construction. We'll identify the types of compensation that are defined as wages. So there's different ways that people get paid, not necessarily from just a paycheck, but they would be deemed a wage. And then we will apply the current tax rates and wage base for FICA and SECA purposes. And you guys should know what that is, especially if you're doing your payroll. Now, I will admit that we wear many hats running our own business. And the one thing that I got tired of doing is actually doing our payroll for the company. It was just never enough time in the day to get back to process the checks, print the checks, and actually, to do that. I was the one using QuickBooks, payroll, and calculating everything, and I got so tired of it. And so we finally switched to a payroll service, which my father, before he passed away, he fought that tooth and nail. He just thought that was ridiculous that we were getting a payroll company to do our payroll. And I absolutely love it. It takes me all of 30 seconds now to type in their hours and hit process, and everything is processed through direct deposit. And so I tell our employees, you got to have a checking account if you're going to work here. We're just not going to do that. Now, if, for instance, somebody couldn't do that, they could still get paid with a check. It's just going to be FedExed overnight. So instead of getting paid the same day everybody else does, it's the very next day. And that can cause a big ruckus as well. But then we will describe the different requirements and procedures for depositing FICA taxes and income taxes withheld from employees' wages. The number one main reason that I went with a payroll service is that they automatically take care of our taxes for us. And it's got to be paid. It gets paid weekly every time we run a payroll. The FICA and income taxes that are withheld from the employees' checks are deposited and sent to the appropriate organizations. I don't have to do any of that. And I do have a little story to tell you that when I was running a home building business, in addition to working for my parents, that I was writing myself a check. So we were building the houses, and we would sell one or whatever, and I paid myself a regular salary. And I'd done it for several months, and I had downloaded, for some reason, the wrong tax tables and was processing my paycheck, and I got off a little bit. And the IRS did knock on my door. And so that was a little situation that I don't want to ever have to experience again. They were super nice, but, they said, we know this is an honest mistake. You got off a little bit, but we need our money and we need it now. And then also, we're going to complete Form 941, the employer's quarterly federal tax return, which is also taken care of by our payroll company. So I love it. That is one less hat that I have to wear, and that is something that I know is getting taken care of because it is very stressful running a green industry business with the things that we have to do now, because I'm in the field with the guys every single day. I'm not just in the office. I'm out there with the guys making sure stuff gets done right. And the last thing that I want to do is come home and actually, process payroll for the next payroll cycle at 8:00 at night. I want to be with my family and enjoy some time. So coverage under FICA. So before an individual is considered to be covered for Social Security purposes, the following must be determined. If the individual is an employee, as defined by the common law relationship of employer-employee, if the service the individual renders is employment, as defined by FICA tax law, and if the compensation the individual receives is taxable wages, as defined by FICA tax law. And we're going to go over that. And so, guys, what we got to be careful of, and I hear this in every seminar, every webinar I do that relates to payroll and stuff like that. Everybody's like, well, I pay piece rate, or I set everybody up as a 1099 contractor, so I ain't got to worry about it. Well, there again, you might want to seek legal counsel, either from your tax attorney or your CPA. I'm just not going to do that. Can I see it working? Yeah, I'm sure it can work. But, I'm the one purchasing the equipment. I'm the one, putting vehicles on the road that's in my name, in the company name, insured by my company, then that makes my employee an employee, not a subcontractor. And I want my guys coming in at 8:00. That's the number one rule. If they're an independent contractor, they can show up when they want to, as long as they're getting the work done. Federal law states that you can't tell them what to do because they're not an employee. So if they want to come in at 10 every morning, that's up to them. If they want to take tomorrow off, that's up to them. They are independent contractors. So again, it may work for some of you and it may not work for others. And here it is, independent contractor versus employee. Independent contractor is the SECA, and your employee is going to pay the FICA. Every person is an employer if that person employs one or more individuals for the performance of services in the United States. So you are an employer. You're a green industry entrepreneur, and you're hiring people and employing them for these tasks. So that person refers to an individual. It can be a trust or an estate, a partnership, or a corporation. So yeah, you can hire a corporation to work for you. Employment applies to any service performed by employees for their employer, regardless of citizenship or residence of either. Certain occupations specifically covered by FICA: full-time life insurance salespeople, agent and commission, drivers of food and beverage or handling laundry, full-time traveling or city salesperson for one firm or person, and individuals working at home on products that the employer supplies and are returned to furnished specifications. So any of that is going to be covered by FICA. And of course, your employees, right? Independent contractor, again, a little bit tricky when it comes to green industry. Persons may be classified as independent contractors if they conduct an independent trade or business. Employees do not pay or withhold FICA on these workers classified as independent contractors. So that's the main thing. They are responsible for it for themselves. If an employer misclassifies employees, there is a penalty, generally equal to the employer's share of FICA taxes plus income and FICA taxes that were not withheld from employees' earnings. However, if employee reported earnings on Form 1040, federal income tax return, penalty is voided. That's because they're going to pay it then. Penalty may be reduced if employer filed a Form 1099. So that's what you're going to give. That's what you're going to give your independent contractor. So again, guys, I can think the best way to describe this, I always compare owning a landscape company compared to being a home builder. Home builder, we subbed out every single thing to subcontractors, to the plumber, to the electrician, to the sheetrocker, to the painter. Everybody got a 1099. Well, especially if they weren't incorporated. If they were incorporated, you don't necessarily have to send that to them. But your insurance company is going to make sure that workers' comp is covered on them. And so that's another issue. You start running your green industry business as a contractor, hiring independent contractors, and you're furnishing them all this equipment. Who's covering the insurance? Also, who's paying the workers' comp and general liability on these people? That gets a lot tricky. You're going to pay it if they're an employee, but who's going to pay it if they are a 1099 independent contractor? So what are taxable wages? We got 2 pages of this. Well, anything's going to be considered cash if it's, it doesn't necessarily have to be cash because you do direct deposit, but it's wages and salaries. So it's that weekly pay for your hourly employees. It's salaries for your, management team or office personnel are typically going to be on salary. It's bonuses and commissions that are paid. So you may have people on, profit sharing or whatever. That is taxable wages for the employee. Cash value of meals and lodging provided for employees' convenience or not provided on the employer's business premises. So maybe per diem or whatever. You're giving them stuff for that. You're paying for that, and it's not on the employer's premises. Fair market value of non-cash compensation examples include gifts over a certain amount, stock payments, and then fringe benefits, personal use of corporate car or flights on employer-owned plane. Well, we're not going to have to worry about that in the green industry. I do know a few electricians and plumbers that have their own planes. So if you're a landscaper and you've got that, please reach out to me because you're doing something right. Because I know the price of those airplanes, even back in the 1970s, you're paying somewhere up to $250,000 for some of those. But those fringe benefits, fair market value of non-cash compensation. Page 2. tips greater than $20 or more in a calendar month. Well, how do we know that? Employees can report tips to employer using Form 4070 or Attributed Tip Income Program, ATIP, a formula based on employers' credit card sales. So more or less in the restaurant business. You know, my daughter's a waitress. You know, she's a college student. She waitress, like the whole year. We take her W-2s and stuff to the accountant, and he's like, look, we're basically filing it for her to say that she did it, but she gets very little back because she really didn't pay much in with the tips and everything. But she did bring home some cash that helped her out. It's not really going to affect landscape employees. Now, my guys will come out and say, hey, so-and-so gave us a $20 and said, hey, go get lunch. That happens very once in a while, or maybe once in a while. I shouldn't have said very once in a while, but it happens once in a blue moon. And I get that. That's cool. And we may also have people, we're using Jobber and we send out invoices. I've had people actually, tip 10% on our invoice just because they're, nice people. And that happens a lot around the holidays. We do a lot of, Christmas lights. So people do tip us on that. And that's just recorded as income, for the business. But, some people will come out and give, $10 or $20 to the crew out there saying, hey, go get you some lunch. Employer, with the ATIP, the employer calculates FICA on the tips and withholds from regular paycheck on these reported tips. So, basically waitresses and stuff, they make X amount of dollars per hour. It's even less than the minimum wage. But must withhold on first paycheck after tips are reported. Employer pays FICA on the reported tips. So that's why you see in restaurants, and I have a lot of friends that are in that industry, and and my daughter knows it pretty well. She was working certain restaurants. She has brought home, like on a double shift, of up to $400 a day. Just certain family-based restaurants that just has a ton of business. And so they're like, Sierra, you want a double shift? She's like, absolutely, because she could clear about 200 each one. And so, but that, she would have to pay a little bit more. And that was before she went to App State, and she was like finishing up high school. She would work doing that during the summer in between college and that. So she could bring home some cash, and she had a pretty good tax return on that. Next page. Specifically, exempt wages, meals, and lodging on the business property for employers' convenience. Sick pay for the difference between employee salary and military pay for soldiers and reservists activated for more than 30 days. Employer contribution to a retirement plan. Employer provided education assistance. And then job-related educational expenses not subject to FICA, and then payments for non-job-related expenses up to $5,250 are exempt from FICA taxes. So, this helps out, especially the guys in the military, because a lot of green industry employees are still serving in the armed forces and the reserves and National Guard. So, I'm glad that actually helps with it. We had a guy in the class did a webinar several months ago, and during 9/11 had a reservist get activated as soon as the towers fell, and was gone for a year, and he paid him his salary the whole time he was gone, and the young man got his activated military pay for that. And I thought that was very, very generous of that landscape contractor to do that. He's like, hey, I'm doing my part. He said, this man's going to defend our country and probably making less because he didn't know what military pay was. He said, I was just going to continue to pay him. So it's good knowing that there are good people out there like that. But FICA taxable wage base. OASDI this is back in 23, here it is 2025. Tax rate 6.2%. Wage base $160,200. Maximum tax is $9,932.40. Hospital insurance, HI, tax rates 1.45%. There is no wage base and a maximum tax for that. And so calculating FICA, we got two examples. Mark earns $165,000 per year. He's the weed eater man on the crew, right? And is paid semi-monthly on the 15th and 30th, basically like military pay. Determine FICA for the December 30th payroll. First, find prior payroll year-to-date gross. 165 divided by 24 is $6,875. Semi-monthly pay. So he's got 24 pay periods that he's going to get a direct deposit or paycheck. Hint, how many payrolls were run before the December 30th payroll? Multiply that by the gross per payroll. So it's $6,875 times the 23 payrolls before the day equals $158,125. How much will be taxed for OASDI? The $160,200 minus $158,125, so $2,075. Mark's OASDI tax is $2,075 times the 6.2%, so $128,65. Employer's tax is the $275 times 6.2, same thing, $128,65. How much will be taxed for the hospital insurance? Both Mark and employer's HI tax is the $6,874 times 1.45, $99.69. How much is the total FICA? Total for Mark is the $128.65 plus the 99, $228.34. Same thing for the employer, $228.34. Example 2. John earns $225,000 per year. This is the guy driving the mower. And seriously, my guys think they should get that, to be honest with you. That way they don't only have to work, 2 or 3 days a week. But he's paid monthly. Determine FICA for November 30th payroll. First, find prior payroll year-to-date gross, 225 divided by 12. So he's getting $18,750 monthly. Hint, how many payrolls were run before the November 30th payroll? Multiply that by the gross per payroll. So 18,750 times 10 payrolls before that day, 187,500. How much will be taxed for OASDI? We got the 160,200. So zero taxable wages. Employer is $0. Facts. John earns $220,000 per year and is paid monthly. Determine FICA for November 30th payroll. How much will be taxed for that? John's HI tax will be $328.13. The $18,750 times the 1.45% is $271.88 plus 9% additional for hospital insurance for wages greater than $200,000. We have $206,250 prior wages plus this month's pay minus the $200,000 times the 0.9% additional HI is $56.25. Employers will be $271.88. Employer does not pay 0.9%. SECA in independent contractors, the self-employed tax rate is paid if net earnings exceed $400. So net earnings is net income plus distributive share or partnership income. If you own more than one business, offset losses and income, calculate self-employed tax based on combined net income. So this tax, 15.3%, 12.4% OASDI plus the 2.9 hospital insurance plus 0.9 additional HI if self-employment income or SE alone exceeds $200,000. Can have wages from a job and self-employment income. Count both toward calculating the cap of $160,000 for OASDI. And facts. Matt's wages from his job are $170,000. This is another example for self-employed, and his self-employment income is $15,000. So he's cutting grass on the side, guys. How much is his FICA on $15,000? No OASDI is due because Matt is capped on the wages. HI is $15,000 times 2.9%, $435. Total FICA is therefore $435. $5. Calculating FICA with employment earnings and self-employed earnings. Example 2. Bill has wages from his job that are $68,250, and his self-employment income is $94,500. He needs to quit his real job, right, and focus on his part-time job, make a little more, right? How much is his FICA on the $94,500? OESDI is due on the amount between his wages from the job and the taxable wage base. 160,200 minus the 68,250 gives him 91,950. Multiply that times the 12.4% equals $11,401.80. Bill pays both employees and employers share. HI is 95,500 times the 2.9%. 2,740 for HI. Total FICA, therefore, is $14,142.30. So he's going to pay it, right? He's making that self-employed, and that is going to that'll get you. SS4 and SS5, file SS4 with the IRS to get employer identification number or your EIN. Usually you'll do that right after you form your LLC or corporation. Sometimes you can get it pretty quick. Your accountant can also get it for you. Sometimes that's the best thing to do. But I've also seen it when you file like online through one of these corporation people that'll help you incorporate, then these people will start kind of sending you emails and stuff like that, and they may charge you a little bit more. You can actually do it yourself. File SSF5 application for a Social Security card to receive a Social Security number. Employers can verify up to 10 names and Social Security numbers per screen, or upload the file up to 250,000 names and Social Security numbers with verification results the next day. Returns required for Social Security purposes. File Form 941 Employer's Quarterly Federal Tax Return. Download on the IRS Forms, Instructions, and Publications page. Due on the last day of the month following close of quarter. So January 31st, April 30th, July 31st, and October 31st. It's the last day of month following the close of the quarter. So you got a month to actually do it. If that falls on a weekend or legal holiday, file the return on the next business day. Now, again, I get these 941s like mailed to me from, feds and stuff like that. However, my payroll people are actually doing this for me. So I'm still just getting that blank form in the mail. And I've asked my accountant, he's like, your payroll's doing it, you're good. Major forms for preparing FICA tax returns and deposits. Employers who owe $1,000 or less in employment tax per year may file Form 944. Form 945, annual return of withheld federal income tax should be filed for non-payroll items, pensions, IRAs, etc. Depositing income taxes and FICA taxes. Page 1 of 2. FICA taxes and income are always deposited together. Each November, IRS notifies employer whether it will be a monthly or semi-weekly depositor or next calendar year look back period. Monthly, pay FICA taxes and income taxes by the 15th of the following month. Semi-weekly, if payday is Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, then the following Wednesday. If payday is Saturday, Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday, then do the following Friday. However, one-day rule states that if $100,000 or more of federal payroll tax liability is due, taxpayer has until close of next banking day. So a lot of people, larger companies can run into that, especially having, several hundred employees actually working for you in that payroll period. And I know people that have to, to make these tax deposits, weekly. We do it weekly. I'm not required to because I'm not that big, but I go ahead and do it. I don't want a big tax bill due every 3 months and then I've got to actually pay that. Again, that gets them knocking on the door. So I'd rather pay it a little bit as we go. Depositing income taxes and FICA taxes, 2 of 2. No deposit is required if accumulated employment taxes are less than $2,500 for the whole quarter. New employers are monthly depositors unless $100,000 of liability triggers one-day rule and converts them to semi-weekly. Deposit making rules that apply to employers of agricultural laborers resemble those for employers of non-agricultural workers. So household or domestic employees are usually not subject to the federal income tax withholding. How to deposit FIT and FICA electronically, 1 of 2. The original paper-based system has been replaced by an electronic depositing system. Most employers are now on EFTPS, Electronic Federal Tax Payment System. Only exception is for businesses owing $2,500 or less in quarterly tax liabilities. Enroll in EFTPS by completing Form 9779, the EFTPS Business Enrollment Form. Employers who want to use online option must enroll at EFTPS online. How to deposit electronically, 2 of 2. 2 electronic methods. You have direct. This is withdraw funds from the employer's bank account en route to Treasury's account. Through the financial institution, employer instructs bank to send payment directly to the treasurer's account at the Federal Reserve Bank. Your choice. Preparing Form 941. Employer's quarterly federal tax return. You got your federal identification number up there at the very top. Name, not your trade name, so that'll be you. Trade name, if any. So here we have Justin Granatelli. His trade name is Granatelli. There's his address, Chicago, Illinois. Number of employees who received wages, 26. Wages, tips, and other compensation, $74,895.92. Federal income tax withheld from wages and other compensation, $12,372.13. And then column 1 and column 2. Taxable Social Security wages was the total wages, tips, and compensation, $74,895.92 times the 0.124% is the $9,208.07.09. Again, total Medicare wages, the same, $74,895.92 times 0.029 gives us $2,171.98. This is for January, February, and March. So again, he would have until the following month to actually submit that. Total Social Security Medicare taxes. Let's add column 2 from lines 5A, 5A I, 5A double I, 5B, 5C, and 5D, $11,459.07. Total taxes before adjustments is lines 3, 5E, and 5F, $23,831.20. Current quarter's adjustments for fractions of cents, 0.15. Total taxes after adjustments, $23,831.05. You can tell this is an old form. They've stuck it in a typewriter. It's almost like typewriter print. Total taxes after adjustments and non-fundable credits. Subtract line 11G from line 10, $23,831.05. Total deposits for this quarter, including overpayment applied from a prior quarter and overpayments applied from Form 941-X, 941-XPR, 944-X, or 944-XSP filed in the current quarter. Again, $23,831.05. Total deposits and refundable credits, $23,831.05. Tell us about your deposit schedule and tax liability for this quarter. Line 12 on this return is less than 2,500, or line 12 on the return for the prior quarter was less than 2,500, and you didn't incur a $100,000 next day deposit obligation during the current quarter. If line 12 for the prior quarter was less than 2,500, but line 12 on this return is 100,000 or more, you must provide a record of your federal tax liability. If you're a monthly scheduled depositor, complete and deposit schedule below. If you're semi-weekly scheduled depositor, attach Schedule B, Form 90, Form 941, and go to Part 3. And still, Justin Granatelli, his employer identification number. He's not put anything in there. He wants to allow an employee, a paid tax preparer, or another person to discuss this return with the IRS. He's checked no. He has signed it, printed his name. He is the owner, dated it, best daytime phone number. If he had had a paid preparer, they would actually put that in there if his accountant had done it. And then how to report and reconcile FIT and FICA. Make deposit with Form 941 if the taxes for the quarter are less than $2,500. Use 941-V when making the payment, or can pay by credit card. Electronic filing options available for employers who meet requirements. Complete an e-file application, then electronically submit 941. Apply for a PIN on the IRS website and file electronically through third-party transmitter. And then can use reporting agent file clients Forms 941 electronically. Can correct errors on previously filed Form 941s by filing a Form 941-X. Now, types of penalties. And we all love getting penalties from the IRS, don't we? Failure to comply with penalties will be added to tax and interest charges. Negligence can also result in fines and imprisonment. Interest rate is set quarterly based on short-term Treasury bill rate. Penalties imposed for not filing employment tax returns on time, not paying full taxes when due, not making timely deposits, not furnishing payee statements to employees and contractors on a timely basis, and not filing information returns with the IRS on time, and then not supplying identification numbers. Now, guys, I've always said, you will get visited by your local IRS agent if you are not paying your employer taxes. This is the first thing to get them to knock on your door. You can get by with, filing your yearly income taxes. They'll give you a break. Yeah, you got a penalty and you can probably get that waived. You still pay the interest or whatever. But this is first and foremost important as a business owner. That is why 110% I would never, ever, ever not pay my taxes, pay my employee obligated taxes at every payroll. I want it done immediately. Want it done right away. I don't want to have to pay it, semi-weekly or, quarterly. I don't want to do it. I want to do it every single week. Now, in conclusion with this course, we did identify for Social Security purposes those persons covered under the law and those services that make up employment. And then identify the types of compensation that are defined as wages, apply the current tax rates and wage base for FICA and SECA purposes, describe the different requirements and procedures for depositing FICA taxes and income taxes withheld from employees' wages, and then complete Form 941, employers' quarterly federal tax return. So, and guys, I do want to talk just a little bit more about that independent contractor, because I know a lot of people do that. I have had individuals in the seminars actually run with it and actually do good with it. Now, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard me talk about, the businesses within the business, that you have a company. And let's take me, for example. We run Elite Landscape Contractors, Inc. And so my accountant has told me, he said, Eric, I want you to have businesses within the business. He said, I want Elite Landscape Contractors, Inc. to own nothing. That is your landscape contracting company. You are doing business with that name. You are Elite out there doing your landscaping. He said, I want you to have a company called Elite Leasing that owns all of the equipment. Elite Landscape Contractors does not need to own the equipment. Elite Leasing LLC does. And he said LLC for that reason. But I'm an Inc. I'm a C Corp guy. So it could be done either way. It really could. But you have Elite Leasing, and then you have Elite Employee Agency, LLC, that your employees work for. So Elite Landscape Contractors leases the equipment from Elite Leasing and then uses a temporary employment agency for its workers under Elite Employment Agency. That way, I'm protected 100%. If Elite Landscape Contractors, has, just any type of mishap or whatever that's getting sued, it owns nothing. It owns nothing. And so I kind of took that concept after hearing a lot of the guys in the seminars saying, Eric, I have my 1099 contractors lease the equipment from me. I own the equipment. I hire these guys, tell them, hey, you can lease this equipment from me. Pay me weekly, pay me monthly, whatever you want to do. You can lease it from me. Here's the jobs that I have. This is what I'm getting for these jobs. Anything else, and I'm kind of looking after whatever, but you rent the equipment from you and then invoice me and I will pay you for what I'm doing. Yeah, they're making a percentage off the jobs. And I've asked them, well, what about your insurance? He's like, well, these guys have to get their workers' comp and general liability. They do. If not, you're going to have to be paying it as the employer. And so these guys actually get it. They get whatever they call their ghost policy is or whatever. It actually covers them on that. So is that legal? Maybe, maybe not. Like I said, always speak with your attorney or your CPA on that. But that's the only way that I could basically see it. Now, these guys are not required to wear your uniforms then. They're not required to have your logo on the trucks. So your whole marketing thing can be thrown out the window because, again, they are considered 1099 contractors, which means they can show up when they want to, they can wear what they want to, and if they're leasing the equipment and the trucks from you, they don't necessarily have to have your logo on it. So brand awareness would be hurt when that actually happens. So you got to think hard and long about that. And it's very difficult to get people to show up in the mornings at 8:00 anyway. If they're a 1099 contractor and you say you're on your own time, I don't want those guys showing up at somebody's house at 8:00 at night on a Friday trying to get grass cut because they're having a party or something there. It doesn't. We have normal working hours. So anyway, guys, I hope this class has been beneficial. I know it ain't the most luxurious and glamorous thing to talk about, but it is something of importance to our green industry businesses. So anyway, guys, I hope this has helped. And this is Turf Teacher signing off, and I will see you in the next lecture.